All right, so there's been the whole thing going on about so-called ESG, which I completely understand if you have no idea what that is and you could not care less. But it basically is this idea that corporations and banks and funds and whatever, rather than just focusing exclusively on shareholder value, they're also going to incorporate these goals of conscious capitalism and trying to do better on environmental, social, and governance goals. Now, as I have explained and we've discussed extensively in the past, there is a sort of right-wing critique of this, which is like about wokeism and they should just be maximizing shareholder value and how dare you insert your values into these business decisions. That's the Vivek Ramaswamy argument. The argument that I make and others on the left make about ESG is that this is all fake corporate virtue signaling, that it's effectively greenwashing, and you don't really mean any of it, including on your fake diversity metrics or diversity trainings that you're doing, that all of it is, again, just sort of surface level corporate virtue signaling. So one of the leaders in the whole ESG quote unquote movement has been the head of BlackRock, Larry Fink. So let's go ahead and put this up on the screen because he made some very interesting comments here about his view of ESG. He said at the Aspen Ideas Festival, gross, that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' decision to pull $2 billion in assets had hurt his firm in 2022. And to be clear, DeSantis pulled those funds because of these ESG woke concerns from the right. But he also made clear last year was his company's best with net flows of $200 billion from U.S. clients. So don't worry, guys, they're doing just fine. But what he said that was so interesting is, quote, "I'm ashamed of being part of this conversation. When I write these investment letters," which his investment letters are very closely watched and widely read, et cetera, "it was never meant to be a political statement. They were written to identify long-term issues to our long-term investors." Then later in the conversation, he kind of walked back those comments. Right. He was pressed on it, and he said, "I never said I was ashamed." He literally did say he was ashamed. "I'm not ashamed. I do believe in conscientious capitalism. I'm not going to use the word ESG because it's been misused by the far left and the far right." So, right. Saagar, what do you think of this?
Well, in the very same breath, he goes, "Instead, we'll talk about decarbonization. We'll talk about governance or social issues." So he basically just described ESG without using the term ESG. Look, I think ESG is a cancer for a variety of the reasons that you just said. I do actually believe it is a cover for a lot of woke BS and virtue signaling, which is genuinely bad because it's also stuff that is implemented in your name, even if you're invested in funds or stuff that you have no idea about. This isn't just for rich people, although predominantly, some 40-something% of Americans have a stock in their retirement portfolio. So you inadvertently could be funding something that you don't agree with. So that's number one. Number two, though, in terms of the left critique that you're absolutely correct about, is how does Tesla not rank as an ESG company? Now, and then do you know the reason why? Well, Tesla doesn't and Exxon does, or Shell Gas. It's literally because they game the scores around, climate conscious. My favorite example was, I believe this was Shell, was offloaded some mine to some African company, released it through a subsidiary. And by selling off something and decreasing their carbon score, upped their ESG score and was ranked as some great company. Come on, oil and gas company is ranking higher than the biggest electric car company in the world. Ludicrous. So obviously the entire thing is fake. The problem that I see right now is that for a long time, one of the reasons why ESG was not pushed back by a lot of the capital class is they were doing really well. But right now, we're in a tech recession at the very least. And so the problem is that tech companies, of course, are going to rank very, very high on ESG. They don't really make anything, software as a service and all that, very, very high stock price. The issue, though, is that the oil and gas companies, they're doing super well. So now we're in a place where investors actually have to try and pick between ESG and making money. And when they do, they're like, well, this whole ESG thing, maybe we'll just go with maybe the S and the G. We'll go with that.
I think that is the key point here, is that it was always fake. I mean, that's the thing.
So it's fake, but it has had a real impact. And I think that's kind of what I want to emphasize, is there are genuine social problems that have been a result of ESG, like DEI programs that we've seen been implemented.
But again, those things are fake. We know they don't work.
Well,
it's just like
but they make people more racist.
Giveaway to the consultant class.
Well, that's still bad.
I want to push back on. Listen, the consultant class already has a million grifts. DEI is just one of them, right? I want to push back on the idea that you asserted that it is in any way different that people would be supporting, social goals or whatever that with their funds accidentally that they don't actually support. That happens all the time. I mean, that's the reality of capital. Do you think that people who have their money in a pension fund that supports, some company that's like union busting and exploiting their labor, like they don't support those values either?
Yeah.
So the fact that the default in capitalism is like ruthless exploitation, and that's not seen as a problem, there's no pushback on that. There's no thought of like, oh my God, people are supporting things with their money that they don't really actually support. I just think that there's a lopsidedness to the conversation. In terms of the bottom line being the money making here, put this up on the screen because I think this speaks to the virtue signaling piece. BlackRock, one of their top folks in terms of running their ESG efforts, they actually became a whistleblower and were like, this is all bullshit greenwashing. All it does is give people like a happy, fuzzy feeling that, oh, corporate America can fix the problems and don't worry about it. They've got it. And conscientious capitalism, it's the wave of the future and we're all gonna be good to go. They said this is nonsense. As you were saying, Saagar, they can easily game the system to make the numbers come out so it looks like they're carbon neutral, it looks like they're meeting their environmental goals, whatever. But actually, research has showed that so-called ESG companies and funds actually do worse on environmentalism than non-ESG funds. So I guess in that way, Saagar, you are right that it has like actually been bad because they use this cloak in order to, appear like they're doing all the right things and they're good on all these issues when in reality, they're able to be even worse than the companies that are not pretending.
Yeah, I think that's, no, I mean, I agree certainly on the latter. I think my point on the former, though, is that, just because you've never had representation doesn't mean it's a good thing. I actually do,
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, in terms of pension fund example, like in terms of a pension fund having no say or whatever, I think they should. I think people should have more impact and have thought into the stuff that they're investing in.
Sure.
This is one of my bigger problems a lot with index funds, the lack of governance around some of them. I think I've done something on the past here about Bloomberg. Bloomberg will include major Chinese multinational corporations that are industrial inside of its index fund, that people who invest in the index fund, they don't even have any idea. How much research do people really do when they invest in ETFs? So my point is that people should have the ability to not go on autopilot and have the U.S. economy basically auto-invest in stuff that you not only don't agree with, but is also bad for the country. I mean, you have to be a freak weirdo like me to actually go and read the prospectus and some of this stuff.
Sure. Well, and I don't want to ascribe to you the views of like Vivek Ramaswamy because that would not be fair because it doesn't reflect, what you actually think. But I think it's fair to say on the right, the concern only goes in one direction. It's not this consistent, like we should have transparency and people should know what they're investing in. It's, a value judgment about these particular things. And so DeSantis, for example, pulling funds from BlackRock, Ramaswamy setting up his own fund that is being used to force companies to not care about these values. It's not that they want things to be neutral. It's that they have their own ideological agenda that they want to be represented by corporate America that they felt like used to be reflected by corporate America and, is not 100% anymore. But ultimately, my big takeaway from all of this is that it's a very surface level conversation. And I think that's reflected by the fact that Larry Fink, who has been a leader in talking about this and, creating this whole space, can so easily walk away from it and be like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. I'm over it, I'm moving on.
He says, I'm ashamed, but I'm still going to talk about social governance.
If this was still such a core part, these are your values and your conscientious capitalism, whatever, you wouldn't be freaked out by a few presidential candidates or whatever calling out wokeness and saying ESG and like demonizing the phrase. Your core values, I think, would supersede that, but apparently not the case.
There is no core value on Wall Street except the dollar.
The dollar, the almighty dollar. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right, we're subscriber funded, we're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.